The early morning sun struggled to pierce Manhattan's urban canyons, casting long shadows that danced between skyscrapers like silent performers in an endless urban ballet. Broadway stirred to life with its characteristic intensity, delivery trucks backing into narrow alleys, cafe workers arranging sidewalk chairs with mechanical precision, and the ever-present symphony of footsteps creating the city's heartbeat. Among this carefully choreographed chaos moved Marcus Williams, a 12-year-old boy who had mastered the art of urban invisibility. Marcus's worn sneakers, 3 sizes too small and held together with determination and carefully knotted laces, carried him through the growing crowd with practiced efficiency. His faded blue hoodie, a hand-me-down from the shelter's donation bin, hung loose on his thin frame, its oversized nature serving as both comfort and camouflage. The morning air carried the tantalizing aroma of fresh bread from Antonio's bakery, a scent that had become both friend and tormentor during his 6 months on these streets. The boy's daily routine had become a masterclass in survival economics. He knew exactly which cafes would look the other way when he collected still warm bagels from their backdoor bins, which coffee shops had kind-hearted baristas who might accidentally make an extra hot chocolate, and which corners were safe enough to pause and rest without attracting unwanted attention from either law enforcement or less savory street inhabitants. This morning, however, was different. Marcus's stomach had progressed beyond its usual hollow ache to a sharp, demanding pain that made even walking difficult. The shelter's evening meal program had been overwhelmed yesterday, leaving many, including Marcus, with nothing more than a small cup of soup and half a sandwich. His mother, Maria, working a double shift at the hospital laundry facility, wouldn't be back until late afternoon, and the emergency granola bar she'd left him had been shared with a younger shelter resident who'd been crying from hunger the night before. As Marcus navigated the increasingly crowded sidewalk, his keen eyes, too old for his young face, constantly scanned his surroundings, a habit born of necessity rather than curiosity. That's when he saw him, Samuel L. Jackson, walking with the kind of purposeful stride that parted the morning crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. Marcus recognized him instantly. The actor's films were regular features on the shelter's ancient TV, where movie nights served as a weekly escape from reality for its residents. Jackson moved with that characteristic confidence that seemed to radiate outward, creating an invisible bubble of respect in the rushing crowd. He wore casual clothing, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and a leather jacket that spoke of comfortable luxury rather than ostentatious wealth. What caught Marcus's attention, however, wasn't the actor's fame or his commanding presence, but something in his eyes, a watchfulness, an awareness of his surroundings that reminded Marcus of his own careful observation of the world. The boy's initial instinct was to shrink away, to maintain his carefully cultivated invisibility. Yet something else stirred within him, a combination of desperate hunger and an inexplicable sense that this moment mattered. Perhaps it was the way Jackson had once described his own childhood challenges in an interview Marcus had caught fragments of through the shelter's common room TV. Or maybe it was simply that after months of being overlooked, ignored, and avoided, Marcus yearned for someone, anyone, to simply see him. The decision crystallized in his mind with surprising clarity. His mother's words echoed in his memories. "Your dignity isn't in your circumstances, Marcus. It's in how you carry yourself through them." She had taught him that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was courage. Even as she worked impossible hours, studied for her GED in stolen moments, and fought through a system that seemed designed to exhaust rather than assist, she maintained that core belief. Marcus's feet moved before his doubt could root him in place. His heart thundered in his chest, its rhythm drowning out the cacophony of street noise. Each step felt like a negotiation between fear and necessity, between shame and survival. The distance between him and Jackson seemed to stretch and contract with each movement, as if the very space was uncertain about allowing this intersection of such different worlds. The morning sun finally broke through the building tops, casting a sudden shaft of light across the sidewalk. In that illuminated moment, Marcus found himself close enough to smell the subtle scent of leather from Jackson's jacket, close enough to see the subtle tension in the actor's jaw as he checked his phone, close enough that the next step would make retreat impossible. This was the moment, the thin line between remaining a shadow in the urban landscape and becoming visible, with all the vulnerability and possibility that visibility carried. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his mother's courage, his own hunger, and the crushing pressure of a system that had pushed them to this moment. In the space between heartbeats, between being unseen and seen, Marcus gathered every ounce of dignity he could muster. The boy who had learned to be invisible was about to be seen, really seen for the first time in months. And in that moment, Broadway's endless performance gained two new players, an unlikely pair whose interaction would ripple out far beyond this morning's chance encounter. The space between intention and action often holds a universe of possibilities, each weighted with consequence and potential. For Marcus, that space lasted exactly 3 seconds, the time it took to draw a steadying breath, square his thin shoulders beneath the oversized hoodie, and step into Samuel L. Jackson's direct line of sight. The actor's stride hadn't faltered, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, had already registered Marcus's approach. Tracking him with the kind of attention that suggested nothing on these streets escaped his notice. "Excuse me, Mr. Jackson," Marcus began, his voice carrying the careful articulation his mother had drilled into him, even as it trembled slightly with the effort of forced confidence. Could you buy me some bread?" The words hung in the morning air, simple yet heavy with implication, a request that was both exactly what it seemed and so much more. Jackson's reaction defied the practiced celebrity responses Marcus had occasionally witnessed from his hidden vantage points on Broadway. There was no quick fumble for a wallet, no hurried attempt to move past, no practiced smile masking discomfort. Instead, the actor stopped completely, his body language shifting from purposeful movement to absolute focus with the kind of precision that had made him famous. The morning crowd parted around them like a stream around sudden stones, creating an unexpected pocket of stillness in the urban rush. Jackson's eyes, carrying that same intensity that commanded cinema screens, studied Marcus's face with careful consideration. The boy fought the urge to shrink back, to disappear again into the safety of invisibility. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Stand straight, look people in the eye. Remember you're asking for help, not forgiveness." "Bread," Jackson repeated, his voice carrying that distinctive timbre that had delivered countless memorable lines, now softened with something that wasn't quite pity, but rather a sharp understanding. "When's the last time you ate, son?" The question cut through pretense with surgical precision, addressing the reality beneath the simple request. Marcus felt the weight of truth pressing against his teeth, struggling with the instinct to minimize, to make his needs seem smaller, more manageable. "Yesterday afternoon," he answered finally, the words coming out clear despite his dry throat. "Half a sandwich at the shelter." The admission cost him something, a piece of the careful facade he'd constructed to navigate these streets. Jackson's expression shifted subtly, something flickering behind his eyes that spoke of personal recognition. The actor adjusted his stance, turning fully toward Marcus in a way that acknowledged him not as an interruption, but as a priority. The morning sun caught the silver in his beard, highlighting the contemplative set of his mouth as he processed Marcus's words. A young woman hurrying past with a coffee cup nearly collided with them. Her startled, "Oh my God, you're..." cut short by a single look from Jackson that managed to be both polite and dismissively final. His focus remained unwaveringly on Marcus, creating a bubble of privacy in the public space through sheer force of presence. "What's your name?" Jackson asked, his tone carrying the same gravity he might use to deliver crucial dialogue, treating the question not as a formality, but as vital information. The respect in his voice struck Marcus like a physical force. When was the last time an adult had asked his name as if it mattered? "Marcus Williams, sir," he responded, unconsciously straightening further. "I'm 12. The additional information spilled out unbidden, something in Jackson's attentive silence drawing forth words Marcus hadn't planned to share. "Marcus," Jackson repeated as if testing the weight of the name. "Well, Marcus Williams, I think you and I need to have a proper conversation." He gestured to the diner behind them. "Joe's all night, its windows still fogged from the morning grill heat. And proper conversations require proper seating and proper food. Shall we?" The invitation hung in the air between them, offering more than just a meal. Marcus hesitated, years of street-learned caution warring with desperate hunger and an inexplicable sense of trust. Jackson waited patiently, his presence creating a shield from the rushing crowd, giving Marcus the space to make his choice without pressure. "My mom," Marcus started, then paused, realizing he was about to decline help because of ingrained fears. Jackson's expression softened further, understanding flooding his features. "We'll call her from inside," he assured. his voice carrying absolute certainty. Everything in the open, everything clear, no decisions without her input. That work for you? The terms were offered with the same respect one might use in a business negotiation, acknowledging Marcus's agency in this moment. It was this, perhaps more than anything else, that allowed Marcus to nod his acceptance. As Jackson opened the diner door, the warm air carrying the scent of coffee and cooking food washed over them, and Marcus felt something shift in his universe. A moment where asking for bread had somehow opened a door to something far more substantial. The diner's bell chimed above them, announcing their entrance to a half-empty restaurant where the morning regulars were too absorbed in their routines to look up. A waitress approached, recognition flickering across her features before professionalism took over. Jackson guided Marcus to a corner booth with the practiced ease of someone used to finding private spaces in public places. As they settled into the cracked vinyl seats, Marcus realized that this simple request for bread had become a turning point, though he couldn't yet see where this new path might lead. What he did know, with growing certainty, was that Samuel L. Jackson's response to his question had already begun to reshape his understanding of what it meant to be seen, to be heard, and to be treated with dignity. Joe's all-night diner existed in that peculiar space between worlds, where night shift workers crossed paths with early risers, where the boundaries between social classes dissolved in the democratic ritual of coffee and eggs. The vinyl booth, where Marcus and Samuel L. Jackson sat, seemed to create its own sanctuary, separated from the rest of the world by the gentle hum of conversation and the rhythmic clink of cutlery against plates. Jackson waited until the waitress had taken their order, a full breakfast for Marcus, coffee for himself, before leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on the worn formica table. "Tell me about your mother," he said, the words carrying neither judgment nor pity, but rather a genuine interest that caught Marcus off guard. The boy's fingers played with the paper wrapper from his straw, folding it into increasingly smaller squares as he gathered his thoughts. "Her name's Maria," he began, his voice finding strength in pride. "She works at Mount Sinai Hospital in the laundry facility, double shifts mostly." He paused, then added with careful precision, "She's studying for her GED in between shifts. Says education doesn't have an expiration date." Jackson's expression shifted subtly, recognition flickering across his features. "Smart woman," he commented, then reached for his phone, placing it on the table between them. "Would you like to call her? Let her know where you are?" The offer was presented casually, but Marcus recognized the deeper meaning, an acknowledgement of boundaries, of proper protocol, of respect for family structures. The call to Maria was brief, but transformative. Jackson spoke with her directly, his famous voice carrying both authority and gentleness as he explained the situation. Marcus watched in fascination as his mother's worried tone gradually shifted to cautious hope. By the time the call ended, arrangements had been made for Maria to meet them at the diner during her morning break. As their food arrived, a plate piled high with eggs, bacon, pancakes, and hash browns for Marcus, Jackson settled back, his presence creating a space where conversation could unfold naturally. "You know," he began, watching as Marcus tried to maintain proper manners despite his hunger. "I grew up in Tennessee. Wasn't always easy. Wasn't always sure where the next meal was coming from either." Marcus paused mid-bite, surprise evident in his expression. The actor continued, his voice carrying the weight of lived experience. "Success changes your circumstances, Marcus, but it doesn't erase your memory of what it was like before. Sometimes it shouldn't." Over the next hour, as Marcus's plate gradually emptied and was replaced with a second helping, a conversation unfolded that transcended the typical boundaries between celebrity and stranger, adult and child, helper and helped. Jackson shared stories of his own youth, of the community that supported him, of the teachers who saw potential where others saw problems. In return, Marcus gradually opened up about his dreams, his fascination with architecture, born from hours spent sketching building designs on discarded newspapers, his hope of somehow finding a way to create spaces that could help people like himself and his mother. "Show me," Jackson said simply, sliding a clean napkin across the table. Marcus hesitated only briefly before pulling a stubby pencil from his hoodie pocket, another habit born of necessity, the need to always be ready to capture ideas. As he sketched his vision for a community center that could double as an emergency shelter, Jackson watched with growing interest. The drawing was rough but showed remarkable insight. Spaces designed for privacy while maintaining security, areas for children to study and play, efficient layouts that could accommodate multiple needs. "You've thought about this a lot," Jackson observed, studying the sketch with genuine attention. "When you spend time in shelters," Marcus replied, his focus on the drawing allowing him to speak more freely, "you start to see how they could be better, how small changes could make big differences." It was during this exchange that Maria arrived, still in her work uniform, her face bearing the tired dignity of someone who had learned to carry heavy burdens without complaint. Jackson stood to greet her, and something in his manner, the respect, the lack of condescension, seemed to ease the tension in her shoulders. "Your son," Jackson began, gesturing to the architectural sketch, "has quite a gift." He went on to explain what he had learned about Marcus over breakfast, painting a picture not of a hungry child seeking bread, but of a young visionary who had maintained his dreams despite challenging circumstances. Maria's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, her hand finding Marcus's shoulder. "He gets his determination from his father," she said softly. "Before we lost him to cancer last year, he always said Marcus would build something important someday." The conversation that followed wasn't about charity or immediate solutions. Instead, it focused on possibilities, educational programs, architectural mentorship opportunities, stable housing options that would allow both mother and son to focus on their respective studies. Jackson made calls, his voice carrying the kind of authority that opened doors previously thought locked. But more importantly, he listened. He listened as Maria explained the cascade of events that had led them to the shelter. Medical bills from her husband's illness, the loss of their apartment, the struggle to maintain normalcy for Marcus, while navigating a system that seemed designed to exhaust rather than assist. He listened as Marcus described his daily routines, his strategies for continuing his education despite their circumstances, his methods for helping younger children at the shelter cope with their own situations. As the morning stretched toward noon, what had begun as a simple request for bread had transformed into something far more significant, a meeting of souls who, despite their vastly different circumstances, recognized in each other the same core of resilience, dignity, and determination to create positive change in the world. Change, when it comes, rarely announces itself with fanfare. Instead, it often arrives in quiet moments, in simple gestures that ripple outward, transforming lives in ways that become apparent only with the passage of time. For Marcus and Maria Williams, that transformation began with a request for bread but grew into something far more substantial through the deliberate, thoughtful actions that followed their chance encounter with Samuel L. Jackson. The first changes were practical, almost mundane in their simplicity. By the end of that initial meeting, Jackson's team had arranged temporary housing in a local extended stay hotel, not as charity but as a stable base from which mother and son could begin rebuilding. The actors' involvement was quiet, strategic, focused on creating opportunities rather than headlines. "The media love a good story," Jackson had explained to Marcus during one of their follow-up meetings, "but some stories need to grow in privacy, like seeds underground. You understand?" Marcus did understand, recognizing in Jackson's words the same protective instinct his mother showed when shielding him from the harsh realities of their circumstances. Within a week, Maria had been connected with a hospital administration training program, an opportunity that built upon her existing experience in the healthcare system, while opening doors to advancement. Her GED studies found support through a flexible online program, with Jackson quietly ensuring that both mother and son had access to the technology they needed. For Marcus, the changes were equally profound but carefully calibrated to maintain stability. A scholarship materialized for a prestigious middle school known for its STEM program, where his architectural interests could find proper nurturing. But it wasn't just about education. Jackson's team worked to ensure Marcus had access to counseling, understanding that the trauma of homelessness and loss needed addressing alongside academic opportunities. The story might have remained private. It have, known only to those directly involved, if not for a single tweet from a diner patron that morning, just witnessed Samuel L. Jackson turn a simple request for bread into a masterclass in human dignity. No cameras, no press, just real help. The tweet gained traction, not because of celebrity involvement, but because it touched on something people desperately wanted to believe, that genuine human connection could still triumph over performative charity. When reporters eventually came calling, drawn by the viral nature of the tweet, they found no sensational story to exploit. Instead, they discovered a carefully orchestrated network of support that had been put in place with minimal fanfare. Jackson's only public comment on the matter was characteristically direct. Sometimes you meet someone who reminds you why you're in a position to help. Marcus reminded me of that. The rest is between us. The real story, the one that mattered, unfolded in quiet moments over the following months. It lived in the late-night study sessions where Maria, exhausted but determined, worked through her GED materials while Marcus sketched building designs at the hotel room's small desk. It breathed in the weekly mentoring sessions Jackson arranged with actual architects, who found in Marcus not just talent, but a unique perspective on how design could address social needs. The transformation wasn't just about Marcus and Maria. Their story, though largely kept private, created ripples throughout Jackson's network of influence. The actor began quietly funding architectural programs in underserved communities, establishing scholarships specifically designed to support students interested in community-focused design. The shelter where Marcus and Maria had stayed saw unexpected improvements, as anonymous donations led to renovations that surprisingly aligned with many of the suggestions in Marcus's original napkin sketch. 6 months after that morning on Broadway, Marcus stood in front of his middle school class, presenting a project on community-centered architecture. His designs, now refined through months of mentorship, showed the same core insight that had caught Jackson's attention, an understanding that buildings could either heal or harm, depending on how thoughtfully they addressed human needs. Maria, watching from the back of the classroom, wore her hospital administration trainee badge with pride. She had advanced quickly through the program, her years of observing hospital operations from the laundry facility providing unexpected insights into efficiency and patient care. Her GED was now complete, and she had already begun taking community college courses in healthcare management. Jackson attended the presentation as well, slipping in quietly and standing at the back beside Maria. No photos were taken, no press was alerted. His presence was that of a mentor, a friend, someone who had recognized potential and helped create the conditions for it to flourish. As Marcus concluded his presentation to enthusiastic applause, he caught Jackson's eye across the room. The actor gave him a subtle nod, one that carried acknowledgement not just of how far Marcus had come, but of how far he could still go. The boy who had asked for bread had found not just sustenance, but purpose. Not just help, but opportunity. The epilogue to this story continues to write itself daily in the lives of those it touched. Marcus's designs now fill multiple sketchbooks, each one more sophisticated than the last, all focused on creating spaces that serve community needs. Maria's studies have put her on track for a management position, her experience informing policies that better support hospital staff at all levels. And somewhere in the city, Samuel L. Jackson continues his daily routines, carrying with him the reminder that the most powerful acts of kindness are often the ones that create lasting change, rather than momentary sensation. The simple request for bread had become a catalyst for transformation, proving that when help is offered with respect and understanding, it can nourish not just the body, but the soul. The true measure of this story's impact lies not in its viral moment or the media attention it briefly attracted, but in the quiet revolution it sparked in how one corner of the world approached the intersection of privilege and need, of celebrity and humanity, of simple requests and profound responses. It stands as a testament to the fact that sometimes the most meaningful changes begin with the simplest of questions, asked in moments of desperate courage, answered with unexpected grace.